Well, a very good evening to everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this Iron Knowledge series. Today's session is a special one and also relevant and a very topical in the context of India's position on the global map. India's defense sector has undergone major reforms as the government is trying to strengthen the nation's defense prowess by reducing dependence on imports. There's an increased focus on indigenous equipment and technology, aided by a favorable tilt in the policy framework. It is heartening to see that India today has more than 190 startups in the defense sector, building innovative technology solutions, and many more in the making to bolster our defense capabilities. To speak on all of this and more, we have with us two very distinguished gentlemen, Dr. Ajay Kumar, former Defense Secretary of India, and Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, co-founder of HCL and a leading light in the hardware space. Dr. Kumar, Dr. Chaudhary, it is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Kumar served as the Defense Secretary of India from 2019 to 2022. He is accredited to scale up defense exports to the tune of rupees 13,000 crores with the introduction of modern warfare capabilities, disruptive technologies, and innovations. Dr. Kumar is credited to have transformed the defense industry ecosystem as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and under which he architected and established the iDEX initiative, which has helped to create a conducive and cost-effective defense startup ecosystem that fosters innovation and technology development. He is the recipient of several awards, and in 2019, he received the Distinguished Alumni Award from his alma mater, IIT Kanpur. Dr. Chaudhary, as participating members would know, is the co-founder of India's biggest tech firms, HCL, and also board member of IIM. A Padma Bhushan recipient, Dr. Chaudhary has constantly been driving the grand vision of reviving India's electronics industry and has been on several government committees, including NITI Aayog and MeitY, India's Semiconductor Missions Advisory Board. He recently launched his book, Just Aspire, where he reflects on his life, journey, and more. The book comes with valuable lessons for today's aspiring entrepreneurs. A very warm welcome again to both of you. On that note, I would request Dr. Chaudhary to please take the stage with Dr. Kumar. I would request all participants to feel free to put their questions in the Q&A box through the session for our speakers to take them up later. With that, over to you, Dr. Chaudhary.
Thank you, Rajneesh. Let me just begin by saying that if we look at the United States and we go back to the history of how the US created its whole scientific and engineering capability, it all goes back to 1945, when whenever Bush wrote a manifesto in which he was the head of science in America and at that time, and he wrote a very well-known manifesto which described what the United States should do in the next 20-30 years and how science and technology have to be really part of that whole plan. And that was accepted by the US president. And of course, out of that emerged the bomb and of course, DARPA. So DARPA is something that I would like to specifically talk about because the Defense Research Organization in the United States has played a very, very major role in creating large number of technologies in the United States. As a matter of fact, the first computer was born out of a research that was created through DARPA in one of the universities. And later on, of course, the internet came out of DARPA. And then, of course, DARPA created this whole model where they would invite industry and startups to create products and would encourage them by giving them business and then scaling them. So it's been a terrific strategy that the United States adopted through DARPA. Now, something similar, interestingly, is happening in India. And Dr. Ajay Kumar has been at the forefront of doing something like this. Me and him worked very closely together many years ago in creating India's electronics policy. But then he took all that learning from electronics policy into defense, and he created iDEX. And I would leave it to him to talk about what he did, how he did, and what is iDEX and what is it doing to the defense industry? How is it creating a completely new industries in India, and how startups are benefiting from iDEX? Over to you, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaudhary. Thank you very much, Rajneesh. And good evening to everyone who's tuned in today. It's indeed a pleasure to be talking to some of the brightest people in the segment and to share some work which has been done in the defense sector in the last few years. As Mr. Chaudhary has so rightly put in, defense has been one of the sectors which has been on the cutting edge of technology. And the frontiers of technology have actually advanced because of the defense needs. In US, DARPA played a very important role in creating several new technologies, which are today now have grown actually not only in defense, but also with suitable changes in the civilian sector. Unfortunately, if we looked at ourselves, the defense ecosystem here, was little different. We had big defense public sector undertakings, which were largely responsible for all the defense production. And even defense R&D was largely monopolized by the government. Despite the best efforts that were taken, in 2017-18, we continued to be the world's biggest importer of defense equipment. And the general, the fact remained that at least for the last 3-4 decades, efforts had been made to make India self-reliant in defense, but none of that had really succeeded. And questions were being asked that, is it really possible for India to ever have its defense technology, which is actually cutting edge technology, which is the latest in that particular domain? In this context, I think the government took some major policy initiatives and showed the political will and determination to actually walk the talk. There are many initiatives that have been taken, but I think one of the most important ones has been to open up the defense sector. And when I say opening up, it meant that all stakeholders in the sector were brought together. The industry, the academia, and the startups. Industry came in through several ways. And although the policy decision to open up the defense sector to private industry was taken up in 2001, due to various systemic internal pulls and pressures, even by 2017-18, the contribution of private sector to the defense value addition was minimal. But here now the government took some substantive decisions so that a reasonable chunk of the defense market would actually go to the private industry. And I would specifically like to mention here two things. One is the positive indigenization list, which earmarked certain equipment, and that list has been continuously expanding for only domestic industry. And the second is earmarking of capital procurement budget for domestic industry. It was started in 2019-20 when 54% was earmarked for domestic industry. And this share of budget for domestic industry has been continuously increasing. This year, it is 75% of the budget. Equally importantly, apart from earmarking it, the budget for domestic industry, 25% of this budget has been marked for private industry. This might seem that it is still a small fraction of the total budget, but I would like to say that today, the actual share of private industry still continues to be quite low, as below or nearly 10% or so. But it is now seeing a growing trend. Along with this earmarking of budget, three major programs, three major schemes, which are called Make One, Make Two, and Make 3 were introduced in the defense acquisition procedure in 2020. And each of these are basically industry-led. So there was a clear intent that industry will be facilitated in defense procurement. And along with that, in 2018 was the launch of iDEX, iDEX Innovation in Defense for Excellence, wherein it was an ambitious attempt to bring in startups in to do meet the requirements of the defense forces was thought to be attempted. Now, I must say that this was kind of bold step at that time, because by that time, if you look at 2018, even the big industry players who had private players who had entered defense had actually not been very successful. And therefore, to have said that we will have startups to come and do this was quite, incredible in some ways. Let me fast forward to what happened since 2018. The journey has been absolutely phenomenal. The startups have responded with vigor and quality which even in the best of imagination we did not think of. Rajneesh mentioned there are 190 startups. I would like to say that there are 190 winners of iDEX today. There are at least more than 1,000 startups who are actively working in defense area. But for each of the challenges, initially we started with small number of challenges. The Defense India Startup Challenge 1 had, I think, about 10 challenges. And then, of course, new defense challenges were brought about. Slowly, as we saw the startups were able to take up the defense problems and give solutions, the number of challenges that were taken up was increased. But the best part was there were startups who came up for they came up with a solution for a challenge in matter of 12 to 18 months, things which used to take several years. There were startups, under the iDEX, the maximum grant or support that government was providing was 1.5 crore, and that too based on milestones. And previously, most of defense R&D projects used to run into hundreds of crores and used to take tens of years, or at least 10 years or more. And here we had startups who were doing at a fraction of the cost in fraction of the time. And the most important thing was that as time went by and the tribe of these startups kept on increasing, the number of challenges kept on increasing. And I'm happy to say in 2022, we did 150 challenges in a matter of 3 months. All these challenges were none of these were mere components or subsystems or small things only. Initially, we started with small things, but again, as time passed by, the challenges in 2022 that I am talking about relate to the most advanced underwater technologies, which the Navy had identified. And in October 22, relating to space, which is the first major government-led initiative to have more startups in the space ecosystem. Both these set of challenges were launched by the Honorable Prime Minister. And I'm so glad to mention the 75 challenges which Navy came out in August 2022 were snapped up by the startups in a matter of 2 to 3 months. And all those challenges have successful iDEX winners who are doing this problem, or solving those challenges. I want to make one more point. Very often in the past, indigenous technology was identified with Jugaad, with also ran, nearly there, nearly as good. But here, none of the startups have actually done stuff which is not as good as the best and many times better. In fact, it was a pleasant surprise when the United States Air Force Research Laboratory approached us in Ministry of Defense and said that they wanted to work with one of our iDEX startup winners for the kind of work that was being done by him was not even being done in the United States. And I'm happy to say that that startup is doing exceedingly well. I can mention another example when in quantum key distribution, one of our startup actually was able to achieve distances on a single hop of 150 kilometers over fiber. Whereas, and this they did about 9 to 12 months back, whereas even today, the best that has been achieved anywhere in the world is 120 kilometer. And why I mentioned this 9 to 12 months, as you know, in technology, the specification of technology are important at a point of time when things are changing so fast. But even nearly 1 year down the line, people have not been able to catch up with their technologies. What has happened as a result of this? I can go on with several more examples. We have today, large number of startups, iDEX startups, who are not only they have developed the prototype, but between 2018 and 2022, in less than 4 years, the challenges were given, the legal documentation, etc., with the winners was completed so that the money could be released. The work on the development of the solution was started, solution developed, prototype made, testing done by the defense forces, and procurement started, and at least 18 solutions were done before October 2022, and I understand now several more are under procurement. The point I'm saying is, in defense, the whole cycle being completed in 3 years was something which is unheard of. I may share with you the average time for procurement alone in defense previously used to be 5.5 years. I'm saying for well-established products which were available, just to go through the process of procurement, the average time was 5.5 years. Here we are talking of challenges, start from challenges being issued and actual procurement taking place in 3 years. What has been, the impact of iDEX has been absolutely transformational on the whole ecosystem. What it did was that it gave the confidence to the armed forces that, the point which I made in the beginning, that can we actually create state-of-the-art technology? Can we actually do something which is available in other parts of the world? And this transformation is today visible in the way armed forces are coming forward and supporting the whole iDEX initiative, supporting the startups in general, and supporting the Atmanirbhar effort in defense as a whole. It has also transformed the interest of the small scale, mid scale, and large scale industry. Today, a number of companies who were traditionally looking to do only small level stuff and were not really looking to develop their own products are now venturing into this, seeing that if startups can do it, why they can't. I must also share this, that the defense public sector undertakings, which have traditionally been for decades, been production houses, big production houses, and they have been masters of defense production, have also been bitten by the technology bug. And in the last 3 years, over 2,000 patents have been filed by these defense PSUs. There are several new products which defense PSUs have created, particularly relating to unmanned vehicles, unmanned boats, unmanned aerial vehicles, other artificial intelligence related products, which they have done on their own without waiting for any specific need, because they are confident that these products can be sold either to the indigenous market or the global market. Mazagon Docks, which has been making submarines, in fact, the only yard which makes submarines in India. In the last 30, 40 years, they have made German submarines based on German technology, Russian technology, most recently Scorpions based on French technology, but had never ever thought of creating their own technology for submarines. Based on this whole galvanized ecosystem, a group of youngsters in Mazagon Docks moved their board with a request that they would like to develop their own submarines, given their own experience in this segment. And the board has approved creation of a midget submarine by Mazagon Docks. I mean, these are signs of a larger change apart from what we see. And I think the last point which I want to make before I want to stop and be happy to take further questions is, I think there is a huge transformation in the defense ecosystem. There is optimism. There is confidence. There is movement also. And the biggest part of it, in the past, there have often been issue of how do you get defense ministry, which is like a huge, big, organization, to work cohesively. The forces say one thing, the ministry says another thing, the industry, the defense PSU says another thing, DRDO says another thing, and the industry says another thing, and very often these don't work together. One of the important, I think, factors which contributed to this change of ecosystem in the country in defense has been ability to bring together all these stakeholders together in a single platform, which iDEX did very effectively. None of the iDEX decisions were taken by the ministry. They were all taken through a collegiate mechanism with no captain. It was, everyone was equal, everyone was heard, and a view was taken based on something by which best interests were there. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the DRDO, the defense PSUs, and the Ministry of Defense and the Finance were all party to it. And they have all contributed together collectively, which has enabled the movement in this sector. Let me just make one last point, and this is also with respect to the point Ms. Chaudhary said, and he made an extremely valuable point, that DARPA is a gold standard in some ways in defense innovation. Unfortunately, in India, we have yet to have a DARPA kind of a model. What DARPA does, as several of you know, when they come out with a challenge, they invite responses, and if there are good responses, more than one responses is selected, and based on milestones, these multiple winners are allowed to progress. If one of the winner is not able to progress, then he is given a go by on the wayside as they go along. Now, this approach in Indian system in the past has not been possible, because this amounts to funding someone whom you will abandon even if the product is not successful. But in R&D, that is bound to happen. Not everyone who will start will be able to be successful. So iDEX, one of the things that was done in iDEX was that we said we will take multiple winners. Remember, we were in the end, we were only giving 1.5 crores in a ministry which is used to giving money by hundreds and thousands of crores. And we said we will set milestones, which was set by, we means the collective collegiate wisdom of the people who were involved. And if one of the winners or some of the winners are not able to come up to speed, they will be dropped at that stage. So we kind of imbibed the DARPA model in iDEX. In many of the iDEX winners, initially we select more than one winners. And if both the winners do eventually reach the final stage, then procurement can be done from both of them. If some of them fall by the wayside, that be it. So in some ways, it has tried to accommodate the DARPA spirit in the Indian system. And I think that has also helped a lot in terms of, so today, for example, we have multiple drone companies. We have multiple, crypto companies. We have multiple solutions, several companies doing similar things today. And that's because of this allowing multiple companies to be able to come up with similar solutions. Let me stop here. And once again, thank you for having me here for this talk.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. I think the one question that I would definitely like to ask you is that how does iDEX work? For example, when you put out the challenge and you say that somebody accepts the challenge and applies for it and wins it, then they get 1.5 crores. Do they also have to invest 1.5 crores of their own?
Yeah. So what happens is, so the terms of iDEX is that at least 50% of the money should be brought by the startup, so that he has skin in the game and it is not purely run on government funding. The experience has been that most of the startups have brought multiples of that. So as against 1.5 crores of government grant, people have brought even 10, 15 crores in some cases and done the development. Not only that, because this grant is quite nominal, people do not go for big offices and big cars and that kind of stuff, which has been one of the banes of government grant in aid system. When you get government grant, it looks like free money. But here you are putting your money and you get some support. The biggest support, I think, from government has been in terms of providing the support from this collegiate and also familiarizing the stakeholders with the defense requirements, which is otherwise a black box. People did not know what army needs when they go to the border and what are the challenges, difficulties they actually face. What is that requires to be tweaked to actually make it a defense equipment rather than what a civil or a commercial market would need. And that exposure helped them a lot. And of course, like I said, there was some nominal money just to make sure that we were all part of it.
So the other great part of iDEX program is that once you accept that the product works, then you give them business.
Absolutely.
So what's been the size of business that various startups have got from the Defense Ministry?
So that's again a very good question. So, this is an extremely important question also. One of the reasons why in the past, and I need to go on a little bit of history on this, where indigenous capabilities were not always successful, is that there was a long time taken gestation period for the R&D. And during that gestation period, the technology, as we would expect, would advance. And so by the time the specifications initially set would be reached, technology would advance. And so therefore, there would be revision of requirements. And then again, it will take a long time and this vicious cycle would continue. Here we have done two things. One is we have said that once a product is tested as per a requirement, we will go for spiral development. It is important for startups to get some orders so that the product which has been produced can be tested on field by the forces and they know that this is there. Second is, if they have reached a level of 50, thereafter the forces can say, okay, I have taken 20 units for 50. Now you give me interoperable 20 units for 55. The next higher level of specifications, because in the end, especially in defense, it's always about moving the frontier forward. So this kind of spiral development has been developed. Therefore, third thing is it has also helped startups because most of these startups don't have their own production facilities. A very big bulk order will actually deluge them with a lot of working capital requirements, which they neither have the wherewithal to raise nor the infrastructure. There will be delays. So the whole idea of this extending a helping hand has been to grow with the startups, enable them to produce what the forces need. As you rightly said, the scale in defense is very large, and the startup will not be able, if we suddenly push a big order on them, I think they will get totally submerged in that order. And therefore, the idea is grow with them, enable them to keep advancing the technology and scale up the size as they go.
So is it also possible for defense PSUs to pick up the technology from the startups and also produce the product if scale is required?
So, possibly yes, but I think even more interestingly, what we have been asking the defense PSUs, and several of them are doing this today, is to run their parallel iDEX's equivalent programs, because each of these defense PSUs are huge. And in fact, I must acknowledge here that the first time when we started iDEX, and because there was no government buy-in for the iDEX program, we got 50 crores each from Hindustan Aeronautics and 50 crores from Bell to actually start the first few set of iDEX challenges. And of course, after the iDEX became success, then of course, government started budgeting for it. And today there is no dearth of government money. But HAL, Bell, and all the other PSUs today are doing iDEX equivalent challenges in areas which would help them.
So coming to the next step, you see, as we know that demand aggregation in the government is what really created industries all over the world. And recently, when we look at the whole strategy, when vaccines were produced, demand aggregation was done, and the government gave the orders to private sector. So in the past, it's never happened that private sector got the benefit of government orders. Today, the government is very open to giving business to private sector. And I think that's the biggest change that's happened. So this is something that is defense looking at, this big idea of demand aggregation and, working together with a range of startups to create a solution, which could be A plus B plus C plus D.
Absolutely. And I think demand aggregation is a very, very important strategy, which across sectors can be adopted. And you and I have seen it in LED, how it has made a difference, electric vehicles, and now in vaccines. Defense, of course, I must say in this count, we start with a big advantage. And that is because in defense, it's a monopoly, which government being the only buyer. So we really didn't have to do much. Our demand, in fact, what we did was, is to offer our demand to the private sector. So when I said that we were able to open the defense sector to the private industry, in effect, what it means is we were saying that we are willing to buy from the private sector, because demand is anyway, whether you buy from wherever it is, government is the only buyer. I mean, you don't have private people buying these advanced arms and equipment. So here we didn't have to do much work, but the difficult part was to get, the political will, and to this full credit to the government, to have solidly stood behind the decision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, despite several pressures from outside the country.
So actually, there's been a lot of discussion in the past that we are a Gandhian country and we can't be exporting weapons and equipment, defense equipment abroad. I think all that has opened up, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is, let me put it like this, whether we sell or not, there is a, $500 billion plus arms trade going on in the world and growing. And second is, there is, India, you see, countries which actually sell arms actually have a huge influence on the global stage. Today, it is interesting to mention that more than 3/4 of the arms trade is actually dominated by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, who are supposed to be the peacekeepers of the world.
Yeah.
But if we were to be selling arms, we would, India has had, if you look at our whole thought process, the modern India has never ever tried to occupy anyone else's land or property. Our whole defense strategy is to make sure that we are not unduly, exploited by any person having inimical interest towards us. So it is the thought process of non-violence is somehow built in our thinking. And if we are going to be spreading this message through our own influence in defense diplomacy, then I think even if we are selling arms to other countries, it is our message of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or a message of non-violence, or a message that you don't have to fight to resolve your differences, that we will be able to send across people much more effectively.
So the startups that are iDEX funded are allowed to export?
Yeah, everyone is allowed to export.
So
there
that's
is a certain regime for export. There are export control requirements which are there, but startups can export, any industry can export, everyone can export. And in fact, I must say that several of our startups have received very good orders and interest. Many more have received interests from other countries. And 80% of our growth in exports, we have seen about 800% growth in exports in 3 years. Of course, on a small base, because we hardly had much, but 80% of this growth is led by private sector. So it is the defense exports is largely driven through the private sector industry.
So, a lot of investors get very concerned with long lead times in defense and the cash flow requirements that are there for startups. So how do they sort of think about it when they have to look at investing into startups of our kind? Because very critically, as iDEX gives them the initial support, initial funding and orders, they need more money to grow. And that is where investors come in, and investors like IN members and VCs and others. So it's very important for them to understand how to handle this whole situation of long lead times and cash flow requirements and working capital, etc., etc.
You're absolutely right. Let me say two things. First is, I think on the government side, when I was there, we took several steps to see how to reduce the time for procurement and simplify the testing and trial procedures. And like I said, we put a target that instead of average procurement time of 5.5 years, we should reduce it to 2 years. And by and large, we were able to follow that deadline. I think we really need to benchmark our procurement procedures and the whole process by which we procure with world standards. An effort in that regard is going on, I'm aware. One of the important enablers in this regard would be digitization. Digitization will bring in greater transparency as well as speed in decision making. And I think we hope to see improvement. So there is no doubt that we need to improve the cycle time for procurement, as you have said, and reduce the trials system. A big time consuming effort is a trial procedure. And we have taken up several steps. Today, the trial procedures is largely government centric in-house. So it's the services, it is DGQA, it is DRDO. Now, there is a lot of scope for self-certification. There is a lot of scope for third-party certification and make it independent of the agency which is going to be deciding. There is, as you would agree, if we have both private industry doing R&D and DRDO doing R&D, there is a conflict of interest when it comes to only one agency doing that certification. So those are some of the things that need to be resolved. But having said that, you see, defense is, it's a question of the life of the soldier who's on the border. So therefore, testing cannot be compromised. And therefore, it will take some time. And therefore, the startups and the industry who are participating in it must realize that this is not like a commercial civil market. It has its own requirements of testing, which need to be understood. And those requirements need to be met. However, having said that, I must say that today there is greater receptivity both from the forces side, from the ministry side, to facilitate our ecosystem, and things are improving. From the defense, then of course there is the huge big export market, and I can tell you that this demand is going to continue to grow. We have only seen the tip of the iceberg as far as this is concerned. 13,000 is nothing. I think we will see this grow at least 100 times, So, and India has potential to become among the top 3 exporters. We are now in the top 25 exporters. We have potential to be in the top 3 exporters of defense equipment. And that is also led by the fact that a whole lot of digital technologies are becoming integral part of defense equipment. And as more and more new digital technologies, AI, unmanning, quantum goes in, we will see our companies, our startups doing increasingly more and more influential role in the whole defense trade business.
So actually, if you look at the message that I guess that is going to investors is that you do need a bit of patient capital to come in here, but the future looks fantastic. The size of the market in India itself is huge, and exports are also available for startups. So I think there is no real danger of losing out your money. It's just a question of time. And I think one basic thing that I feel, and I feel very strongly about it, is that whenever an investor puts in money into defense, they're actually investing into India.
That's right. Absolutely right. I mean, you are actually, we often talk of, people who contribute to the security of the nation. When you are investing in defense, you are actually contributing to the security of the nation. And one more small point I want to make. Today, I think the size of our pie is smaller. In fact, one of the challenges which investment is facing is that not enough players. So I think there are many more players who are coming up. There are many more opportunities which are increasing. So I think this is an arena where there will be significant amount of opportunities for new investors to come in.
I must give you a very nice example. 3 months ago, I led one of the defense investments in IAN, and you'll be surprised that it got sold out in 38 seconds. So there is a lot of interest among investors on defense investments. And I think the future looks huge as far as I'm concerned. I think now we'll leave it, Rajneesh, to people to ask questions so that Dr. Kumar can answer them.
Definitely. So I'll request Smriti, but I do have a question. I think it is a bit of a stretch from what Ajay was saying earlier. When we are talking about startups, let's say working within the iDEX and also let's say working with PSUs, they're obviously developing and investing a lot in their IP. So it'll be good to understand how does the IP, which is developed within the startup, is owned by the startup, or it is shared with the PSU. So what's the mechanism there?
That's again a very good question, Rajneesh. One of the things which has also made a huge difference in iDEX as compared to previous efforts is that we decided that the IP created under iDEX will remain with the startup.
Fantastic.
And it will not be owned by all previous efforts to fund startups had always said that if it is government funded, it will be owned by, either jointly or by the government only. We said we will only have margin rights. So what we can do is, if we think there is something very interesting, we can go and buy out the startup on market rates. But we have no other right. So it is startups. And that is why also part funding was important, because we are only funding a part of the overall effort. And so therefore, it was easy for us to take this decision that the IP will remain with the startup.
Okay. And I have another follow-on question. Not related to IP, but also to the development of the technology, because you did mention that 50% of the funding is brought in by the startup, and you've seen far more funding available, and of course, matching one coming in. Now, during the course of the production, is there a dovetailing available, let's say, with the institutions like TDB, which is Technology Development Board, at a reduced rate, so that once the technology is developed, the startups also have an ability to raise some capital, not necessarily equity, to basically, go ahead with the production and somehow manage that gap to produce.
So, iDEX has been something which has been growing, and every time we have been taking it to a new frontier. In October 2022, we for the first time did something called Invest in iDEX event,
Okay.
where we tried to bring together the investment community and the iDEX, so that there is an opportunity for people to know the kind of work which iDEX is doing. And so it benefits both these groups. October 22 was the first time it was done, but and it had a kind of a small, humble beginning. But I am told that in March 23, in Aero India, they did the second round of this event, which was very well attended, and large number of people from the investment community. Second is the defense. Well, if you are able to get a defense order, the terms are fairly, quite, I wouldn't say liberal, because then finance people may suddenly make them stringent, but they're fairly fair, they're equitable. So that itself also enables the startup to get the requisite working capital. It gives them 10-15% advance. So it's not bad, So I think we have not found so far people, once the order is there, we have found sufficient interest from the investment community to be wanting to invest or support the startup in all, whether it is for working capital or whether it is for further expansion.
Right. Thank you so much. Over to you, Smriti. I think there are some questions in the box.
Thanks, Rajneesh, and thanks, Dr. Kumar and Dr. Chaudhary, for that very informative dialogue. So we do have some questions from our participants. So I'll go with the first one. Most of India's military assets are being purchased from Russia, US, France, etc. How challenging is it for Indian players to improve on this platform?
So, first of all, I must tell you that in the last 3-4 years, no major procurement was done, except, very recently we have now decided to buy a Predator. So the story that most of our procurements come from outside is actually a few years old story. Second is, you see, when the problem is when you buy a big platform from outside, it's all proprietary knowledge. And most OEMs will not share with you a lot of proprietary information. And therefore, given the life of platforms may be anything between 20 to 40, 50 years, you in a way become dependent on them for the life cycle of that platform, for servicing, for spares, for replacements, and so on and so forth. So while they do share technology for some of the items, some of the systems, many critical items, they will not share technology, because that is what makes their company, in a unique position. And therefore, your dependence continues. And that is hopefully will change with more and more things coming indigenously from India.
Right. No, absolutely right. The next one, Dr. Kumar, is where is the large scope for large-scale innovations instead of developing small subsystems for the foreign platforms?
Yeah, so like I was said, if you look at the last iDEX challenge, we started something called nested challenges, where big systems, you actually have now satellites which will be developed for defense using iDEX. And the way the nested challenge works is, initially the critical technologies of components are developed. Once those are developed, they go into a bigger system and finally into the ultimate platform. And then, it could be the same startup or it could be different startups doing this in a nested way. So this nested iDEX framework is one way by which the iDEX framework can be used to develop big systems. It requires a little bit of understanding of the system by the government, which throws up the challenges so that you can suitably create these nested challenges. But this is how it is possible to develop big platforms. And this has already been started.
Very well thought through program, sir. Very well.
May I just add one point, Smriti, that the government has very clearly made a statement that 75% of buying will be done from Indians.
Yes.
So I think there's a clear mandate for India to be buying Atmanirbharta.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sure. So we'll move on to the next question. To reduce the lead time for releasing purchase orders, have the armed forces been delegated additional financial powers, or is it procurement still largely centralized?
No. So armed forces have huge powers, and all procurement up to 300 crores is with the armed forces. And also, all development projects up to 50 crores are with the armed forces. The vice chiefs can sanction that also. But I must tell you, it's not a problem of armed forces or ministry. I mentioned the study which we did, 5.5 years. Interestingly, the time taken for average procurement, and I'm talking average procurement, was 5.5 years for the cases which came to the ministry, which were big cases, and 5.5 years for cases which was with the armed forces, which were small cases. So the problem really lies in the system, not necessarily whether it was being decided by the armed forces or by the ministry. It was the process that it was involved in taking the decision. No matter who was taking decision, it took so much time.
Right, right. And you mentioned that procurement cycle has been almost reduced to 3.5 years now.
2 years.
From what?
2
Yeah,
years.
2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Right. Yes. So
And
we'll
then
move on to the.
did a clear decision in the ministry that all cases should be completed in 2 years. A lot of digitization efforts have been put in, timelines have been set in at each, and there are multiple levels and multiple stakeholders. So even if there's a day delay by any stakeholder beyond the timeline, there is alert sent. If it still doesn't work, the alerts are sent to the highest level, to a higher level, and even to the highest levels. If there's, so people are always realizing that if there is something which is held up with them, it will be noticed at higher levels very soon, and that has helped.
Right, right. So we'll move to the next question, sir. Is there an iDEX challenge specifically for artificial intelligence, which can span products like auto recognition of terrorist activities on border via smart CCTV cameras?
Oh, yes. I think there are several artificial intelligence recognition. So image processing, video processing are some of the things which were done in the initial challenges. And I think we also have some solutions today. This is an area where this is fairly, a lot of work has been done, and there are, solutions which are today in various stages in the system. Yeah, but yes, the short answer is yes.
Right, right. Sure. So I'll move to the next question then. Would you be able to identify the current gap in defense products or services that the Indian startup ecosystem should focus on and build for?
Oh, I think that's a very good question with a very simple answer. If you look at the gaps, actually there is big gaps. What we have been able to do, and let me not give the impression that we have become Atmanirbhar or we have solved the problem. We have started the process which has shown that we can solve the problem. And we have possibly, if I were to quantify it just for the sake of explanation, I don't think this quantification is based on any correct detailed assessment. I would say we wouldn't have even have done 5% of what is needed to be done to be really truly Atmanirbhar. So 95% of the area is gap. So there are multiple gaps in all areas. I talk of 3 major gaping areas where we are there's huge area of intervention. But again, like I said, this is just, to give you a sense that these 3 areas is one is because we have so much of electronification and digitization is making our own chips. We are totally dependent on that. The second one is engines. We are totally dependent on engine technology, on whether it is engines for aeroplanes, whether it is engines for tanks, whether it is engine for ships, generators. And lastly, we are still very dependent on materials for lot of the high-tech material, highly advanced materials. In all these 3 broad areas, we are today still behind, but there are many individual components etc., which require to be. Several of these are available on the website, which which is available for everyone to see. But even more importantly, I mean, there are new things happening all the time. So I encourage people to look out for new stuff that is happening out there. Many startups are doing very innovative work on quantum, on graphene, on new technology area, other new technology areas, which will be the future. And I think it may be worth your while to have a look at them as well, which are not even challenges by the forces.
So, Smriti, I'll just come in here because there is a contextual question. Since we talk about topics, there is a question coming in from one of our IN members, Uday Chatterjee. He says, cyber warfare is going to dominate the future wars. Threats around the ability to protect our national grids, power, telecom, etc., is a big challenge. Is this a concern? Is this top of the mind thing within iDEX? Securing defense, communication.
So, cyber security is, if you see the recent round of challenge was totally dedicated to, the most recent round of iDEX was dedicated to cyber security.
Okay.
And this is something which everyone is concerned. And I think related to this, I think that we have to be working doubly hard on quantum. I think this is something which is going to, in next 4 to 5 years, the world is going to get transformed by quantum computing. And every cybersecurity solution that you may develop will be cracked within seconds by quantum computers. So while on one side we should develop the cybersecurity solutions that we need, we really have to work very hard on these, in the area of quantum computing, especially keeping the cybersecurity needs in mind.
Right.
Actually, you did mention about Q&U, which is a very interesting startup, which has successfully created quantum cybersecurity product, which you've actually evaluated.
Yep, that's right. That's right. You and I were involved in that one very deeply.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Smriti, with the next question.
Yes. So the next one is about working capital schemes. So while implementing working capital schemes from the government of India, many banks require startups to be profitable to access any of that money. Is this a blocker for deep tech startups who may not be profitable in the first year of their commercialization, but they still need working capital? So can't the IP also be considered while evaluating a startup for working capital by organizations like SIDBI, SBI, etc.? Do banks need a new view towards startups?
You make a very valid point. In defense, like I said, fortunately, we have seen that a defense order is a big push. It gives a big push to any company and they are able to raise money. But in other sectors, sometimes, order alone is not enough and you need to have other, collateral requirements in terms of, being able to raise working capital. So I think the recent amendments that have been made by government will partially address this problem. And we hope that, in coming times that will be solved. Second is, I think, investment community, I would also encourage, could look at, providing support, especially for those startups who have got orders from the government, whether it is in defense or non-defense sectors, to be able to not only, that will bolster the startups, but will also possibly give good returns if you are able to give working capital in the early stages.
Right. I hope that sort of answers our participants' question. I'll go with the next one now. Is iDEX being able to, Is iDEX being able to catalyze a large number of startups to meet this vital challenge with regards to, I think, the earlier question?
I think the question was on the earlier
Yes, on the earlier one, yeah.
Cyber security.
On the cyber warfare, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we already done that.
Yeah, we already answered that. Right. So I will go ahead with the next one. So for iDEX startups, Who has received the first order from the armed forces? Can we request for bank guarantee waiver for advance payments since startups need to block funds for 1 year?
Yeah, I think there are several such requests, and it's very difficult for me. Personally, I feel that at a policy level, this cannot, and any such decision will never happen for iDEX startups. It will be a larger framework for startups in the country, and personally, I think for MSMEs, for example, there is they are waived with this requirement of bank guarantee for orders up to a particular size. So a similar mechanism can be adopted for startups, where for as long as the order is of a particular size which a startup is accepting, then the bank guarantee requirement could be possibly be raised, or under some such framework that could be created. I think the government could possibly look at this.
Yeah, that's helpful. So the next one is again something related to examples of iDEX winners. Now, iDEX features prominently in DAP 2020. Are there examples of iDEX winners benefiting from procurement timelines, benefits outlined in defense acquisition procedure?
Yeah, I mentioned 18 startups who actually within 3 years of the initial the announcement of the challenge, they were selected, legal formalities completed, developed the prototype, developed everything, got everything, and they are under various stages of procurement. 18 such orders have been issued by Ministry of approvals have been given by Ministry of Defense, where up to October 22 and more thereafter, the number of which I do not have.
Right. All right, so we'll move ahead with the next one. And in the interest of time, we can take, I think, the last two ones. How does tendering process work for innovative startups where multiple vendors may not exist?
Yeah, so in this particular case, under our system, the requirement is, and even otherwise, even prior to iDEX coming in, when you do a tender, if there is only one response, you actually technically evaluate it and do a reasonability of price assessment and go ahead with the procurement. I must also share for the general information of our audience here that actually GFR even if we are so defense, this is done many times, but even if it was not defense, the general financial rules of the government permit such procurement, where even if there is a single vendor, and if there are no other vendors, you can go ahead and procure goods from that vendor. So this is very much within the rules of Government of India.
Right, sure. I have one question here with regards to you.
As a matter of fact, I will give some more inputs to the startups
Sure.
and investors. There is something called a proprietary article certificate. And if they can actually produce a proprietary article certificate, the government accepts it for buying. It's defined in the government purchase rules.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very
If you have a
interesting to know.
proprietary product, you can actually give a proprietary article certificate, and GFR rules, which is the government rules for buying, accept it.
Sure. Sure. So I think I think we're done with the questions that we had in the Q&A box. Participants, if you have any more questions, feel free to write to us, and we can definitely take these offline with Dr. Chaudhary and Dr. Kumar.
And Smriti, I think just closing remarks by Dr. Kumar and Dr. Chaudhary. I think just closing
Absolutely.
the session,
Sure.
and to thank them for their time and all the insightful stuff.
No, all I want to say is I want to say thank you to the Indian Angel Network for having created this event. I also want to thank all of you for having spent your evening with Dr. Mr. Chaudhary and myself, and I hope that you would have those who have invested and those who propose to invest, you would have had a slightly better idea of what is the lay of the land. I think there is, as far as if you ask me, there is tremendous amount of energy, there is tremendous amount of vitality, there's tremendous amount of optimism, and the whole sector is on an upward trajectory. So I think it's a good time to invest. So happy investing.
Thank you, Dr. Ajay
Thank
Kumar.
you.
That was a wonderful session. Thank you for giving us so many inputs on how exciting this whole area is. And I think one thing that I take back from it is that just the way DARPA created many, many industries, iDEX and the Ministry of Defense will create a very large industry in India, which will then export globally. And I think one of the things that DARPA did, and I think iDEX will also be doing, is to do some really breakthrough work through startups, which will then create some unique patents in the country, which will be of great value to India. And I think, as I said earlier, I'd like all the investors to think that they are investing into India when they invest into defense startups.
And of course, you know, the latest one, which is an iDEX beneficiary, has gone IPO. I think it's a clear winner there. And I think it demonstrates that it doesn't take 15 years or 20 years or 30 years to go IPO. You know, you can do very well if you're solving the right challenges. So it's one of the stars of I think of the iDEX program, and we should take some lessons, and we should also take a lot of inspiration from that one.
You're talking about IdeaForge?
Absolutely.
Yeah, quite amazing. It's such a great thing to see IdeaForge IPO appear.
Yes. And we do have a few in Ironfold. We have Astrom, we have Dhruva, we have Hyperstealth, and some more. And I hope, to see them also succeed and go IPO. Yeah, Smriti, all yours.
Absolutely. That's very true. And I think what I'd just like to add is, a note of thanks to Dr. Chaudhary and Dr. Kumar today. So thank you so much for joining us. And it was a great conversation that we had, and truly very informative. And thanks for answering all our questions so patiently. I'm sure the audience also had a great time listening to you both. And we'd like to thank you once again, for taking out the precious time today and being here with us and with our participants. Thank you everyone for your keen participation, and we look forward to engaging with all of you again in upcoming sessions. And we do hope that India's defense sector reaches new soaring heights. And on that positive note, I think we'd like to wrap up today's session, and hope you all have a great rest of the evening. So it was a pleasure hosting you all today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.